Hi, I'm Jeff Eisman with Centerpoint Safety Training and Protection. And today I want to cover the safety and information briefing for the Simunition training. Some of the things that we're going to cover today include the Simunition system, the FX marking cartridge that's used for the Simunition training experience. We're going to talk about the conversion kits and the protective equipment needed to conduct the training safely. We're also going to talk about the training environment and some key individuals, including the training safety officer and the officer in charge. We'll end up talking about your training outline prior to your training experience. So what is Simunitions? Simunitions is a realistic personal protection and defensive pistol training experience. It is force on force, or you can use force on target. Force on force requires role players to play good guys and bad guys to help you differentiate between a threat and a non-threat. It is scenario-based training. We will provide you with different scenarios that you have to work through to see if a draw of the firearm is even justified, or if you have to engage the threat, you have to make those life and death decisions very quickly during this training program. We are going to talk about the 3 rings of safety that make this one of the safest trainings out there. And we're going to talk about the advantages of utilizing the Simunition training program. Let's talk about the 3 rings of safety. The first one is technology. So we are going to use the FX marking cartridge. This is mandatory in all Simunition training. The cartridge itself looks like a small piece of ammunition, has brass, primer, a propellant in it. It has a sabot, plastic sabot, and then a plastic projectile that has dyed detergent in it to help us see where hits are impacting on the threat. Conversion kits are kits that we transition live firearms into a Simunition converted firearm. Only Simunition marking cartridges can be loaded into that firearm. No live ammunition can be loaded into the conversion kit. This is also mandatory during the training. And then we're going to talk about protective equipment. We have mandatory protective equipment and then recommended protective equipment. The second ring is the personal responsibility. We are going to have an officer in charge. So the officer in charge is going to be responsible for the entire training experience. We're also going to have a training safety officer. The training safety officer is responsible for all safety in and around the training environment. The training environment in and of itself, there's 3 areas. We have a safety zone. That is the training location. That is where training will take place. We don't allow any live ammunition. No other types of weapons are allowed in that training zone. We have a staging area. The staging area is an area that's free from any impacts from the training location, and it's a place where we will ensure that you have a safety inspection before you go on to the training location. The third area is our unsafe zone. That's where all live ammunition and live firearms and any kind of knives, keys, kubotans, any other type of weapon that could be used to injure somebody, that's where everything is going to be kept, in that unsafe area. So what are the advantages of Simunition training? Simunition training validates your personal protection and defensive firearms training. It takes it to that next level. It is the most realistic training you can get under safe conditions. The Simunition training will quickly point out any conflicts that you have between reality and myth. So how are you going to react in a real-life training situation, in a real-life defensive encounter? It will help you separate those. It will help you feel some of those physiological and psychological reactions that we talked about in prior trainings. It will also quickly point out any training shortcomings that you have. One of the examples I like to give is the use of cover. if you're not using cover and you get hit with a simunition round, it's gonna hurt a little bit of pain compliance, and we're also going to be able to see what part of your body was not behind cover. It also enhances your safe firearm skills development. So we want to also remember those fundamentals of keeping that muzzle pointed in a safe direction, even under stress, and keeping that finger off the trigger until you're ready to engage a threat. This training can be conducted almost anywhere. So it can be done indoors or outdoors. The marking cartridges do not go through windows, they don't go through drywall. So it's a very safe product to use both indoors and out. And obviously, it's a very realistic training program, as we said before, that we can create numerous scenarios to see how you would react in a defensive encounter. Let's talk a little bit about the marking cartridges. So these marking cartridges, which I have an example, if you can see that. So it resembles a live cartridge. However, you see that it has brass, and then it has a plastic sable with a plastic projectile, and that plastic projectile is filled with a dyed detergent. It washes right out of your clothes. It is a non-lethal projectile, so it is not lethal. Okay, it hurts, but it's not lethal. It is safe for improving your critical firearms handling skills. Notice the bright colors. We have red, blue, green, and clear. The different colors allow us, if you have multiple students, you can see where each student is hitting on the threat target. This will function in a simunition converted kit, just like a real firearm. So you will have recoil. The slide will function just like a real firearm, and it will reload the next cartridge. You could have malfunctions with this ammo, just like live ammo. If you have a malfunction, we want you to work through that like you would have a malfunction with a real firearm. In real life, you can't call timeout. So we would ask you to try to work through those malfunctions. The cartridges are very reliable. If we keep the firearms clean, then these work, again, just as reliable as any live ammunition. And they do work in semi-automatics, revolvers, shotguns, and rifles for a variety of training scenarios. The handgun effective range is up to 10 yards, but the maximum effective range is really out to about 25 yards. So most of our scenarios during your training will be within that 10-yard measurement. Let's talk a little bit about the conversion kits. Here is one of the conversion kits on a Glock frame. Notice that it operates just like a live firearm. The slide can be locked back. The conversion kit is blue, and the barrel is a gold color. That gold color and the blue signifies that we have a fully functional conversion kit. It also allows the FX cartridge to be functioned correctly, and it precludes any live ammunition from being loaded into the chamber. Conversion kits must be used during the training environment or training program. I'll grab the magazine. So the magazine is a normal 9mm magazine that fits into the firearm. The cartridges will get loaded into the magazine, and you'll load the firearm just like you would in any other live firearm. Let's talk a little bit about the protection equipment. So there's three things that are mandatory for the protection equipment. The first is a full face protection. It has to be Simunitions certified. Here is an example of the mask and the hard shell that goes on top to cover the head. The other piece of mandatory requirement, mandatory protection equipment that is required is a neck guard. So this is the neck guard, goes right around your neck and fastens in the back. The third mandatory piece of equipment is a groin protection. So groin protection is mandatory as well for the training. Some other things we recommend is a good pair of gloves. We have Simunition gloves, or you can bring your own mechanics wear gloves if you would like. We also have arm protectors. We do ask that your clothing, you want to wear long sleeve shirts that are heavier in material, and you must wear long pants as well. We also have a vest. The vest would help you protect you from incoming Simunition rounds to the chest and the back. This isn't mandatory, but it's highly recommended. Again, clothing for the day, you want to wear a long sleeve shirt, long pants, and preferably heavier material, and it will absorb some of the impact of the Simunition round. Let's talk a little bit about the training environment. So the training environment, just like anything else in our training, safety comes first. It has to be safe for all participants, for all role players, and observers. We want the training environment to be realistic. And it can, like we said before, it can be indoors or outdoors. Let's talk a little bit more about the training zones. So we talked about the unsafe zone. This is where any live firearms, live rounds, any OC spray, chemical agents, mace, any tasers, knives, keys, Kubotans, all that stuff stays in the unsafe zone, away from the training environment. The safe zone is where training is going to be taking place. And then the staging area is going to be free from any impact from the safe zone. And it's where we will also do our safety inspections prior to going on into the training environment. In the safe zone, only training firearms and training ammunition are present. Everyone who enters that training environment, that safe zone, must have a safety inspection. That includes a pat down to make sure you don't have any live ammunition, no live firearms, and no other objects that could hurt somebody else. When we have a hot range, training is taking place, all protective equipment must be on. You must leave all protective equipment on until you hear a ceasefire or an end exercise, end X. If you hear end X, it means all training ceases and we have a safe area that you can remove your protective equipment. Let's talk about the roles that we'll have during the training. The first role is the officer in charge. This individual is going to be in charge of the entire training environment. They will be in charge of all three zones and ensure that the scenarios are being done correctly and safely. You also have a primary instructor. This instructor is going to actually work with you on any opportunities that they see and look at options that you could do better. The training safety officer is going to be a very critical role. The training safety officer monitors all safety for the training experience. The role players are very critical as well. So the role players are going to be acting as threats and non-threats during your training scenarios. And then you, the student, are going to be going through and experiencing all of the scenario training, all the realistic training, and we're going to be able to give you an after-action review after the training is done so that you can improve your skills. You also may see support personnel around. Somebody could be videoing or being a cameraman and taking pictures. Also, you may see additional safety personnel around the training environment as well. Some additional information that we like to cover. The first one is the proximity rule. It's very important. If you get within 2 feet of another individual role player or an instructor, do not pull that trigger on the firearm. It is non-lethal, however, in that proximity, it could be very painful if hit in a non-protected area. Also, just around that same concept, if you do get close, we are not going to do hands-on training. You're not going to be disarming individuals. If you get that close, we're going to call a ceasefire or an index. If you hear the command cease fire, that means stop what you're doing and wait for the training safety officer or the officer in charge to give you additional instructions. If you have a weapons malfunction, again, we want you to work through that malfunction just like you would have to in the real world. If you cannot get that weapon cleared, we'll call an index. We'll make sure that we get that firearm inspected and cleaned if necessary. If you must leave the training area at any time, please make sure the officer in charge or the training safety officer know your whereabouts. If you leave the training area, you will have to have a safety inspection to rejoin the training environment. And finally, we want to talk about any emergency procedures. If you have an emergency or you are injured, please let one of us know right away. We will have first aid kits on scene in the training environment, and we will also have first responders, CPR, first aid, qualified individuals on the premises for the training. Communications, we will have a cell phone designated to call 911 if needed. We will also task somebody to take notes for us if we have an emergency, and we will have a vehicle designated outside of the training environment in case we would need to take an individual to meet EMS personnel at the nearest major highway. We're going to identify all the roles for the emergency procedures prior to starting your training experience. That concludes our safety and information briefing on Simunitions. Again, my name is Jeff Eisman, and I hope you have a great training experience. Thank you.